So today I want to address the five most common complaints I've seen about the Sony A7CR. I want to address them and talk about them from my perspective. Again, I'm a hobbyist photographer. I use this camera almost every day and I absolutely love it. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But let's talk about some of the most common complaint issues that people have with it. The first one is the EVF, and that is the electronic viewfinder. Now, is it the most cutting edge electronic viewfinder in the world? No, not at all. But you got to remember, I'm not comparing this camera to all the other cameras that have come out. Like when reviewers review this camera, they're comparing it to other like high-end cameras or other cameras that have come out in the last year or so. I'm comparing it to the A7 II right here. This is the camera that I used for a long time, and I will tell you the viewfinder on here is much better than the viewfinder on there. So it really depends on where you're coming from. Now, if you have a newer camera and you're thinking about upgrading to this one, or if you're looking at the electronic viewfinder downgrading, that might be a different issue. But for me, and I'm guessing a lot of people who hold on to their cameras for a while, this viewfinder will be fine. And also, you have the screen. So I use the screen quite a bit to look at my pictures, and it's bright enough that even on a bright sunny day, even though we haven't had many here recently in Seattle, but even on a brighter day, I can still use the screen. But again, the viewfinder works just fine. Number two, the lack of a second SD card slot. Now, I have read this complaint in almost every review I've looked up on this camera. And for the average photographer, myself included, like a hobbyist photographer, who cares? I want to remind people this is not a professional level, professional grade camera, right? This isn't the same as the Sony A7R5 or something like that high-end professional camera. There you want two card slots, right? If you're doing wedding photography, that kind of stuff. This is not that. This is a enthusiast camera, a high-end enthusiast camera, but this is for enthusiasts. This is for people who maybe you have a one of those Sony cameras and you want a second body, or you're someone like me who's like, I want one camera that can be pretty versatile and still give me really good image quality. That's what this is for. And for me, I've always had one card slot in here. I have one card slot in the Ricoh GR 3X. I do have two card slots in the XT5, but I only use one. All my other cameras have one card slot, and it's been fine. If you're a professional photographer, again, wedding photographer or landscape or nature photographer, obviously you want to have redundancy. But for me, I don't want to have that much redundancy because that means it's more images to back up. It's not that big of an issue. And again, I'm a hobbyist, I'm an enthusiast, and I'm speaking to fellow enthusiasts. Having one card slot is perfectly okay. The third complaint I've seen is the limited continuing buffering. So like how fast, how much pictures you can take and how like buffer and all that kind of stuff. But let me ask you, realistically, as fellow hobbyist photographers, how often do you actually care about that? I mean, I can tell you right now, the A7 II wasn't that great. The Ricoh GR3X had a brain freeze, isn't all that great. But this is perfectly fine for what I do, right? I'm not photographing motocross sports. I'm not photographing F1 sports, right? I'm not photographing a bunch of little birds in motion. I'm photographing my family. I'm photographing my dog. I'm photographing landscapes. I will occasionally photograph some birds, but even then, it's perfectly fine. Like, I don't need the fastest buffer speed. Again, I'm not a professional photographer. This camera isn't for professional photography. It's for enthusiasts. It's for people who just want a really nice, small, compact camera. There's going to be some trade-offs, and that's one of them. Like, there's no perfect camera. I've said that many times, but that one is the one that always makes me chuckle because, yeah, on paper, and if you're a reviewer, and I'm not knocking reviewers, but if you're a reviewer and you're comparing this to the Sony A7R5, of course you're going to say, well, I wish it was faster, or it's not as fast as this camera. But again, that other camera is a professional grade camera for professional wildlife, professional sports photographers. This is not. This is for, again, everyday use type people like myself. And for me, it's perfectly fine. Again, I have a 1-year-old dog and I can get her playing. I can get her moving around. I take pictures of her all the time, so it'll be fine. Number 4 is the handling and ergonomics. And especially people talking about the joystick or the lack thereof a joystick. So if you see on here, no joystick. You just have this little wheel and you can use this to, move your focus point if you want to. But let me show you this. No joystick. I've not had a joystick in a while. Let me show you this one here. No joystick. Yes, there's a joystick on the XT5 and it's nice because I've used this style wheel to focus and move my focus point around. It's, for me, it's fine. Like it doesn't bother me that much at all. I don't really even think about it. You can use the touchscreen on the back if you want to. I don't use that often, but I do if I'm especially if I have the camera down low and I'm doing some kind of shot like this. It's easier to just touch where you want to focus. But for the most part, it's been fine. It's not a deal breaker. The ergonomics too, it's a smaller camera. Now, again, with the A7CR, you do get a base plate. So if you want, you can put a base plate on there and then it makes it a little bit easier to hold. But I've also got this thumb grip here that I picked up from Small Rig, and it's, again, it's fine. It's not great. It's not the most comfortable camera in the world, but I don't know what is the most comfortable camera in the world. It is perfectly fine. And especially if you're using smaller lenses, you'll be okay. The lack of a joystick was never a decision factor for me on this camera or the A7C2 or even the A7C1. I think it's perfectly fine, to be honest. You'll be okay. Number 5 is the video options or lack thereof, meaning no 8K and micro HDMI out port. And for me, I'm a photographer. I've said many times I don't use these cameras to shoot video, so it doesn't bother me. I really think this camera is a throwback to the Sony RX1 line and the RX1 Mark II. Like, that's the type of camera that this reminds me of. And that's the type of camera I think of when I see this. Let me just say this. Not every camera has to shoot 8K. Not every camera has to be a baller video camera. It's okay to have a camera that is more dedicated to photography. And that's what drew me to this camera. I wanted something that was photography first. Can it shoot 4K video? Yeah, it can shoot 4K video. Is it great? I have no idea, because I'm not going to shoot 4K video with it, but it can if you need it in a pinch. But for me, this is a photography camera, and it's all right. Not every camera has to be a hybrid camera. Not everybody wants to be a hybrid shooter. I want to be a photographer. I shoot video with my iPhone, and it's perfectly fine. I know a lot of people who thinks that's sacrilegious to say, but for me, it's a perfectly fine option to shoot video with. I do not want to shoot 8K with this camera. It didn't factor into any decision. It is a photography first camera, like I said before, and I enjoy that. If you want to shoot 8K video, Sony has other cameras, other small form factor cameras that can do that. This is not one of them. And I get the price tag is really high and it should come with that, but this is a photographer's camera. So overall, I understand the criticism about this camera. I understand where these reviewers are coming from, but I think for hobbyists and for amateurs or people who just like this camera and like this form factor and want a really high resolution sensor that they can then crop in later or have some kind of versatility with, this camera is really good. And those criticisms are not really valid. And again, if you're comparing it to other high-end Sony cameras, then I get it. But if you're just looking at it from where you are and being realistic, like this is what I was using before and this is where I'm at now, there is a massive difference in every single criticism I just said. This is an upgrade over this one. And I really do like it. And I still like my A7 II. It is a really good camera, but this is better for me at this point in my life. It is a really good camera. Let me know down in the comments, like if you own this camera or you're thinking about getting this camera, are those criticisms things that you think about? Or if you bought it, do those criticisms bother you, like the EVF, the memory card slot, the burst speed, all that stuff? Does it bother you? Because again, it doesn't bother me at all, and I'm using it, and is it perfect? No, but again, it's so fun to use. I've been enjoying the images I'm getting out of it. So I would like to know, what are your thoughts on this? Thank you as always for watching this video. If you want to see a middle-aged man talk about photography, photography gear, and the philosophy of photography, this is your channel. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I will see you in the next video. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.